Hello. Today we are on step 9, you'd think I'd know this, of the YouTube series, How Do I Plot a Novel, Memoir, or Screenplay? And if you haven't seen the other ones, please go to the channel, my channel, which is YouTube, www.youtube.com/user/Martha Alderson, which is all one word. And then you can see all the steps and you can sort of catch up if you haven't seen them before this. Because today what I want to talk about is sort of the energy of a story. Because a story is sort of an energetic piece. And if you're aware of where the energy goes and how it builds and falls, you are much better able to arrange your scenes in order to try to fit the format. Because the format is not a formula. It's not like they're rules that you have to follow. These are merely guidelines. But they do sort of mirror the universal story. And the universal story is just sort of the story that takes place in all of us over our lifetimes, in stories themselves, in movies, in nature. There's this whole rhythmic story that happens that we all follow. And the closer you can get to following that storyline in your particular story, the more pleasing it is to the reader or to the audiences, because it's kind of going with their own biological rhythm themselves, so that you're in tune with this whole sort of universal story. So what we did the last couple times was talk about the climax, which is the very end of the story, and it's the crowning glory of the entire story. It's what the whole story is building to. So if you think of that energetically as the highest point in the story so far, of the entire story, so I don't know what you can see, but say this is the end and it's up here. What you want is, you don't want your beginning to be that high, because then you have to be able to create more and more tension that builds higher and higher, and then your climax has to actually be even higher than that. So although you want to start your story with a bang, you want to have some conflict, tension, and suspense, you want to start in the middle of the story and sort of get things going, you want to keep the energy manageable. So that, because what happens is, if this is the climax at the end, your story is going to slowly build in tension and energy to be able to rise to this point. It's an incremental sort of building. And yes, the energy does sort of go up and down throughout the story, but as it goes up and down, it's slowly rising more and more, which means that the scenes that come earlier have less conflict, tension, and suspense than the scenes that will come later. So it's just something to sort of understand, and when you watch a movie, watch how energetically the story unfolds. So that at the beginning it's more introductory, that's about the first quarter of the book, it's about the first quarter of the, the time or the scene count of the movie, and it's introductory, although there's a lot of conflict, tension, and suspense. There's a moment in the beginning that ends the beginning. I call it the end of the beginning. It's this higher scene, so that the energy rises, and then boom, comes this scene that is a turning point. There's no turning back. The protagonist cannot go back to the ordinary world. They have to go forward into the story world itself. In the middle, writers really bog down in the middle, because it's so hard to keep the energy constantly rising. And there are some tips that I have to be able to help you with the middle of the middle. But the end of the middle is sort of the crisis point, and that's the highest in the energy of the entire story so far. Then the energy drops off, because that energetically was such a huge hit to both the protagonist of the story, but also to the readers. They've been reading along, turning the pages quickly, wanting to know what's going to happen, not wanting anything bad to happen to the character, but knowing, because of the way stories go, that of course something has to happen. and then it hits at the crisis. Then because of that, you want the energy to drop for a while. You want the protagonist to be able to rest and regroup and formulate a plan to get to the end, and you want the readers to be able to sort of mourn for the protagonist because they've hit the dark night of the soul and everything has been stripped away from them. And then once the energy drops down, the moment that the protagonist makes the decision to make the first step towards getting to the climax, or facing their greatest foe, or doing what they've always wanted to do, or to be able to grab the goal that they've been setting out to get, that's been sort of eluding them all this time. Once they make that first step, the energy of the story rises to the climax. At this point, there is no slowing down. It's directly straight up. It's an ascent to the climax. And then right after the climax hits, as we talked about the last time, the energy drops, there's a resolution, and the story is over. So just sort of think about your own story. If you can think about what sort of situations you can put the character in to create conflict, to make the energy of the story rise, and to keep things interesting and exciting. And next week we will talk about the other major scenes, so you at least can start to create the skeleton of your story, or the foundation, with these important iconic scenes that you'll have in your story, and then it's much easier to try to link those up once you have those in place, because those will become sort of the the guidepost for the rest of your story, so to speak. So for today, I just want you to sort of arithmetically think about your story. You can go to my website, blockbusterplots.com, and on the resources page, there is a page that talks about the plot planner, and that will show you energetically what I'm talking about visually, so you can sort of see the template itself. You can also go to my blog, The Plot Whisperer. I have lots of tips. Or if you want to follow me on Twitter every day, well, I don't quite make every day, but as often as